The medical bay of Station Terminus smelled like antiseptic and despair. Sergeant Marcus Webb walked through the rows of beds, his boots making soft sounds on the metal floor. The war had ended 3 weeks ago, but the medical facility still overflowed with wounded soldiers from dozens of species. Marcus had seen terrible things during his 5 years as a combat medic. He had held dying soldiers in his arms, watched friends take their last breaths, and learned to keep working even when his heart wanted to break. But nothing prepared him for what he saw in the furthest corner of the ward. A massive Thexian warrior lay motionless on a reinforced bed. The creature was nearly 8 feet tall, with deep green scales that looked like armor plating. His eyes were open, staring at the ceiling with an expression Marcus recognized immediately, the look of someone who was trapped inside their own body. Marcus checked his assignment tablet. The name read, Krolix, former fleet commander of the 3rd Thexian Battle Group. The medical notes were brief and cold. Spinal injury, complete paralysis below the neck. Prognosis, permanent. Status, awaiting cultural discharge protocols. That last phrase made Marcus pause. He had heard about Thexian cultural practices regarding injured warriors. But seeing it in action was different. As Marcus watched, 2 Thexian soldiers walked past Krolix's bed. They were clearly from the same unit, wearing the same insignia that Krolix had on his uniform. But they did not look at him. They kept their eyes forward, as if the bed was empty, as if their former commander did not exist. Marcus felt anger rising in his chest. He approached the nursing station where a Centaurian medic was reviewing charts. "Excuse me," Marcus said. "The patient in bed 47. When was he last repositioned?" The Centaurian checked her records without looking up. Bed 47 receives standard immobile patient care every 6 hours. "That's not what I asked," Marcus said, keeping his voice steady. "When was he last repositioned?" The medic finally looked at him, her 4 eyes blinking in sequence. 8 hours ago. "We are short-staffed, Sergeant. He is stable and not in immediate danger." Marcus glanced back at Krolix. The warrior's massive body was twisted slightly to one side, a position that would cause terrible pressure sores if left too long. Worse, Marcus could see the awareness in those eyes. Krolix knew he was being ignored. He knew what it meant. "I'll handle it," Marcus said. The Centaurian shrugged. "Your choice. But I should warn you, the Thexians consider it disrespectful to their culture. They believe warriors who cannot fight have already died. Interacting with him prolongs his dishonor." Marcus did not respond. He walked directly to Krolix's bed and looked down at the fallen warrior. Up close, he could see old battle scars across the visible scales, metals welded directly into chest armor that could not be removed. This was someone who had dedicated his entire life to protecting others. "Hey there, Commander," Marcus said softly. "My name is Marcus Webb. I'm a medic, and I'm going to adjust your position. It might be uncomfortable for a moment, but you'll feel better after. Blink twice if you understand me." For several seconds, nothing happened. Then, slowly, deliberately, Krolix blinked twice. Marcus felt something unlock in his chest. "Good. That's real good. Can you feel pain?" 2 blinks. "Yes. Are you in pain right now?" 2 blinks. Marcus carefully examined the warrior's position. Thexian anatomy was different from human, but the principles of pressure injuries were universal. He began the careful process of shifting Krolix's weight, supporting the massive body with proper technique. As he worked, Marcus talked. It was something he always did with conscious patience. "I served with some Thexian units during the Battle of Kronos Station. Toughest fighters I ever saw. You guys held the left flank for 16 hours straight. Without that, the whole station would have fallen." Krolix's eyes tracked Marcus's movements. The warrior could not speak, but Marcus saw something in that gaze: surprise. Maybe. Or confusion. Perhaps both. "There we go," Marcus said, finishing the repositioning. He adjusted the bed's angle slightly, taking pressure off key points. "That should help. I'll check on you again in a couple hours." Marcus turned to leave, but something made him pause. He looked back at Krolix, and saw moisture gathering at the corners of the warrior's eyes. In Thexian physiology, tears were rare. Their species only produced them under extreme emotional stress. "Hey," Marcus said, returning to the bedside. "I know what your people believe. But here's what I believe: you're still alive, Commander. Your heart is still beating. Your mind is still working. That means you still matter. That means I'm not going to pretend you don't exist." Kralix stared at him. The moment stretched between them, human and alien. Medic and warrior. Two beings from completely different worlds connected by something neither fully understood. Finally, Kralix's lips moved slightly. The sound that emerged was barely a whisper, forced through a throat that no longer had full muscular control. "Why?" It was one word, rasped out with tremendous effort. But it contained everything: confusion, hope, pain, and the first question anyone had bothered to ask Kralix since his injury. Marcus pulled up a stool and sat down beside the bed, bringing himself to eye level with the fallen warrior. "Because someone has to," he said simply. "And right now, that someone is me." He reached out and placed his hand on Kralix's shoulder, the first deliberate touch of comfort the warrior had received in weeks. "You're not invisible, Commander." "Not to me." Kralix's eyes closed slowly, then opened again. 2 blinks. Marcus understood it meant "thank you" in their newly created language. Outside the medical bay windows, the stars of a dozen systems glittered in the darkness. The war was over. But for Marcus and Kralix, a different kind of battle was just beginning. Marcus returned to Kralix's bedside 3 times during his next shift. Each visit was brief but purposeful. He adjusted the warrior's position, checked his vital signs, and most importantly, he talked. "I grew up in Colorado," Marcus said during one visit, while checking the fluid levels in Kralix's medical monitors. "That's a place on Earth with big mountains. My dad always said that mountains teach you something important, no matter how impossible a climb looks from the bottom. You just take it one step at a time." Kralix blinked twice. Marcus had learned that this meant the warrior was listening, understanding, and in some way, agreeing. By the 3rd day, Marcus had developed a simple system. 1 blink meant no. 2 blinks meant yes. 3 blinks meant pain or urgent need. It was basic. But it worked. For the first time since his injury, Kralix had a voice, even if it was just through his eyelids. The other medics noticed Marcus's attention to the Thexian patient. Some approved quietly. Others thought he was wasting valuable time and energy. One nurse from Andromeda Prime told him directly that he was being foolish. "The Thexians have made their choice," she said. "Their culture, their rules. Why fight it?" Marcus did not argue. He simply continued his routine. But on the 5th day, his commanding officer called him into her office. Captain Elena Torres sat behind her desk, looking tired. The war had aged everyone, but it showed especially on her face. She gestured for Marcus to sit. "I've received complaints," she said without preamble. "About your treatment of the Thexian patient in bed 47. "Complaints from who?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he knew. "The Thexian embassy. They say you're interfering with their cultural practices. They've already processed Kralix's discharge paperwork. He's supposed to be transferred to what they call a final rest facility within 2 weeks. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. A final rest facility. That's a nice way of saying they're going to let him die. "It's their choice, Marcus," Captain Torres said. But her voice lacked conviction. "We can't force our values on other cultures." "I'm not forcing anything," Marcus replied. "I'm just doing my job. I'm a medic. I treat patients. That's what I'm doing." Captain Torres sighed and rubbed her temples. "The Thexians say you're giving him false hope, that you're prolonging his dishonor. Have they asked him what he wants?" Marcus leaned forward. "Captain, Kralix is fully conscious. His mind is completely intact. Shouldn't he have a say in his own treatment? According to Thexian law, a paralyzed warrior has no legal standing. He's considered ceremonially dead." Marcus stood up abruptly, then forced himself to sit back down. Losing his temper would not help Kralix. Permission to speak freely, ma'am? Torres nodded. I've been reading about Thexian physiology during my off hours, Marcus said. Their nervous system is similar to certain Earth reptiles. We have treatments for spinal injuries that were never tested on Thexians because their culture doesn't pursue recovery for paralyzed warriors. But that doesn't mean recovery is impossible. The captain's eyes widened slightly. You're talking about experimental treatment? I'm talking about giving him a chance, Marcus said. A real chance. Not just keeping him comfortable while everyone waits for him to fade away. Captain Torres was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she spoke. I can give you 2 weeks before he's transferred. That's all the time I can buy you. If you can show me something, anything that suggests real progress, I'll fight to extend his stay. But Marcus, you need to understand something. This isn't just about medicine. This is about politics, culture, and forces bigger than both of us. 2 weeks, Marcus repeated. That's enough to start. That evening, Marcus returned to Kralix's bedside with a tablet computer. He had spent 4 hours researching and had found something interesting, a human treatment protocol for severe spinal trauma that involved electrical stimulation and intensive physical therapy. Commander, Marcus said, pulling up his stool. I need to ask you something important. Do you want to try to recover? And I mean really try, even if the chances are small, even if it means going against everything your culture believes? Kralix's eyes locked onto Marcus's face. The silence stretched between them. Then, with an intensity that made Marcus's breath catch, Kralix blinked twice. Yes. Marcus nodded slowly. Okay. Then we fight. But I need you to understand this is going to be hard. Harder than any battle you've ever fought. There will be pain. There will be days when you want to give up. And there's no guarantee it will work. 2 blinks. Yes, I understand. We have 2 weeks to show some kind of progress, Marcus continued. After that, they want to transfer you. So we start now. And we don't stop. Over the next 3 days, Marcus began implementing a basic physical therapy routine. He started with simple exercises, attempting to stimulate Kralix's muscles, even though the warrior could not move them voluntarily. He researched Thexian anatomy, finding pressure points and nerve clusters that might respond to treatment. Other patients began to notice. A Valorian pilot missing, one arm watched from her bed. A human soldier with prosthetic legs wheeled his chair over during one session. What are you doing? The human soldier asked. Refusing to give up, Marcus answered simply. The soldier nodded. Need any help? By the end of the first week, Marcus had assembled an informal team. The Valorian pilot, who had been a physical therapist before the war, offered advice. A young xenobiologist, working in the station's research lab, volunteered to analyze Kralix's neural responses. Even Captain Torres stopped by once, watching silently from the doorway, but the Thexian delegation also noticed. On the 8th day, 4 Thexian officials arrived at the medical bay, their scales gleaming with ceremonial paint. They were not pleased. The lead official, a warrior named Thexmar, approached Marcus directly. His voice was deep and carried the weight of authority. Human medic, you are interfering with sacred traditions. Commander Kralix's honor demands that he be allowed to pass with dignity. Marcus stood his ground, though Thexmar towered over him by 2 feet. With respect, sir. Commander Kralix is still alive. Doesn't he deserve a voice in this decision? He has no voice, Thexmar said flatly. The moment his body failed, his voice was silenced by our laws. Then your laws are wrong, Marcus said quietly. The medical bay went silent. Several alien patients gasped. No one spoke to Thexian officials that way. Thexmar's eyes narrowed dangerously. You dare! Show them! A rasping voice interrupted. Everyone turned. Kralix had somehow forced sound through his damaged throat. His eyes burned with an intensity that silenced even Thexmar. Marcus understood immediately. He grabbed the communication board. He had created a simple tablet with large buttons that Kralix could activate by moving his eyes across a tracking sensor. Slowly, laboriously, Kralix spelled out 3 words that appeared on the screen in large letters. I choose to try. The Thexian officials stared at the screen in shock. In their entire history, no paralyzed warrior had ever made such a request. The medical bay remained frozen in silence. The words on the screen glowed like a challenge to centuries of Thexian tradition. I choose to try. Dexmar stared at the screen, his scaled face unreadable. The other three officials behind him exchanged uncertain glances. Finally, Dexmar spoke, his voice carefully controlled. This is not possible. Our laws are clear. A warrior who cannot fight has no standing to make decisions. Marcus stepped forward, positioning himself between the officials and Kralix's bed. But he just did make a decision. You all saw it. He's conscious. He's aware. And he's asking for a chance. He does not understand what he asks, another official said. The shame of prolonged weakness is worse than honorable rest. Shouldn't that be his choice to make? Marcus replied. He commanded entire fleets. He led thousands of warriors. Suddenly his judgment means nothing? Thexmar's tail swished in agitation, a sign of deep frustration in Thexian body language. Human. You do not understand our ways. This is not cruelty. This is mercy. We spare our fallen warriors the humiliation of dependence. Or maybe, a new voice interrupted, you spare yourselves the discomfort of caring for them. Everyone turned. Captain Torres stood at the entrance to the medical bay, her arms crossed. Behind her stood a tall Valorian pilot and 3 human soldiers from Marcus's unit. Torres walked forward with measured steps. I've been reviewing coalition medical law. According to Article 7 of the Interspecies Medical Rights Charter, any conscious patient has the right to request or refuse treatment, regardless of cultural traditions. That law was signed by the Thexian High Council 20 years ago. Thexmar's scales darkened slightly, a sign of anger. That law was meant for temporary situations, not for what? Torres interrupted. Not for warriors you've decided are already dead? The law doesn't have exceptions, Commander Thexmar. It applies to everyone. The Thexian official's claws flexed, but he kept his voice level. Captain, you are creating a diplomatic incident. The Thexian embassy will lodge formal protests. Let them, Torres said simply. I'll be lodging my own report about attempted violation of coalition medical rights. We can see which one the council takes more seriously. Thexmar stood rigid for a long moment. Then he spoke in his native language to the other officials. Marcus could not understand the words. But the tone was clear. This situation had become complicated. Finally, Thexmar turned back to Marcus and Torres. Very well. I will contact our High Council. But I promise nothing. Our traditions have existed for thousands of years. They will not change because one human medic has misplaced compassion. It's not misplaced, Marcus said quietly. And it's not just me. As if on cue, the Valorian pilot stepped forward. I'll help with physical therapy protocols. I have experience with neural rehabilitation. A young human private raised his hand. I can help with daily care routines. I've got time between my shifts. One by one, other patients and staff members volunteered. A Centaurian nurse offered to adjust nutritional plans. A human engineer promised to build better communication devices. Even a gruff Andromedan security officer, who had been injured in the same battle as Kralix, stepped forward. The commander held the line when my unit was surrounded, the Andromedan said, his voice rough with emotion. He saved 300 lives that day. If he wants to fight for his own life now, I will stand with him. Thexmar looked around the medical bay at the gathering of different species, all united behind one fallen warrior. Something shifted in his expression, not quite approval, but perhaps the beginning of doubt. 3 months, he said finally. I will ask the High Council for 3 months. If there is measurable progress, if Kralix shows real improvement, then we will reconsider. But if there is no progress, he must accept our traditions. Do you agree to these terms? Trenzing 9. Marcus looked at Kralix. The warrior's eyes met his, and 2 clear blinks came. Yes, we agree, Marcus said. The Thexian officials left without another word. their footsteps heavy on the metal floor. As soon as they were gone, the medical bay erupted in conversation. Captain Torres pulled Marcus aside. "You just started something big," she said quietly. "I hope you understand that." "I understand that a good soldier deserves a chance," Marcus replied. Torres smiled faintly. "You're either very brave or very foolish. I haven't decided which yet. But you have 3 months. Make them count." Over the next week, Marcus assembled his team properly. Dr. Sarah Chen, a xenobiologist, ran detailed scans of Kralix's nervous system. She discovered that Thexian neural pathways had remarkable regenerative potential, something that had never been studied because no Thexian had ever pursued recovery from paralysis. "This is incredible," Dr. Chen said, showing Marcus the scan results. "His neural tissue is trying to repair itself. It's slow, and it's incomplete, but it's happening. With proper stimulation and therapy, we might be able to encourage more growth." Marcus felt hope surge in his chest. "So recovery is possible?" "I didn't say that, Doctor," Chen cautioned. "I said there's activity. Whether that translates to functional recovery, I can't promise. But it's more than I expected to find." The team developed a rigorous treatment schedule. Every morning, Marcus worked with Kralix on breathing exercises and attempted muscle activation. The Valorian pilot, whose name was Lyra, handled afternoon sessions focusing on neural stimulation. Evenings were reserved for communication practice and cognitive exercises. The work was exhausting. Kralix pushed himself to his absolute limits every single day. Marcus watched the warrior struggle with exercises that would seem simple to anyone with working limbs, trying to twitch a single finger, attempting to move a toe, straining to lift his head even a fraction of an inch. Most attempts failed, but Marcus celebrated every tiny success, no matter how small. 2 weeks into the intensive therapy, something happened during a routine session. Marcus was working on Kralix's right hand, applying electrical stimulation to specific nerve clusters while asking the warrior to attempt movement. "Okay, Commander," Marcus said, not really expecting results. "Try to move your smallest finger. Just think about moving it. Don't strain. Just focus." Kralix's eyes closed in concentration. Marcus watched the hand carefully, looking for any response to the electrical stimulation. Then he saw it. The smallest claw on Kralix's right hand moved. Just a tiny twitch, barely visible, but it moved. Marcus's breath caught. "Did you just do that again?" "Try again." Kralix's eyes opened, focusing intensely. Another moment of concentration, and the claw twitched again. This time, there was no doubt. "Dr. Chen," Marcus called out, his voice cracking with excitement. "Get over here now." The xenobiologist rushed over with her scanner. She ran it over Kralix's hand, her eyes widening as she read the results. "That's not random nerve firing," she said, her voice filled with amazement. "That's voluntary movement. He's actually controlling it." Marcus looked at Kralix and saw something he had not seen before in the warrior's eyes. Not just hope, but belief. Real, solid belief that recovery might actually be possible. "We've got our measurable progress," Marcus said, a grin spreading across his face. "Now we just need to keep building on it." News of Kralix's finger movement spread through Station Terminus like wildfire. Within hours, medical staff from other departments were stopping by to witness the phenomenon. Within days, journalists from across the coalition were requesting interviews. Marcus declined them all. This was not about publicity. This was about recovery. But the attention brought resources. A neural specialist from Earth offered consultation services remotely. A Thexian medical researcher, working in secret from her homeworld, sent encrypted files about Thexian nerve regeneration studies that had been buried for decades. Even the station commander allocated additional medical equipment to the effort. The progress, however, remained painfully slow. 4 weeks after that first finger twitch, Kralix could move 3 fingers on his right hand. The movements were weak and uncoordinated, but they were real. He could curl his claws slightly, though not enough to grip anything. It was progress measured in millimeters, not meters. Marcus watched Kralik struggle every single day. The warrior's determination never wavered, but Marcus could see the frustration building. Every exercise was a battle. Every tiny movement required enormous concentration and effort. One evening, after a particularly difficult therapy session, Marcus found Kralik staring at the ceiling with an expression of deep despair. The warrior's eyes were dull, lifeless in a way Marcus had not seen since those first days. "Talk to me, Commander," Marcus said, pulling up his stool. "What's going on?" Kralik used the eye-tracking communication board slowly. The words appeared one by one. "Too slow. Not enough. Still useless." Marcus felt his heart sink. "You're not useless. Look at what you've accomplished." The board lit up again. "I cannot even feed myself. Cannot move. Cannot fight. What am I?" "You're someone who's fighting the hardest battle of his life," Marcus said firmly. "You're someone who hasn't given up, even when everyone told you to. That takes more strength than any physical combat. But I was a warrior. Now I am nothing." Marcus stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. He was quiet for a long moment before speaking. "My brother was a pilot," Marcus said softly. "During the war, his ship was hit. He survived, but he lost both legs and his right arm. When they brought him to the medical station, he said the same thing you're saying now, that he was nothing, that he was useless." Marcus turned back to face Kralik. "He tried to refuse treatment, said there was no point. But you know what changed his mind? Another injured pilot visited him. A woman who had lost her wings in combat, literally. She was a Varian, and her wings were gone. She told him that being a warrior isn't about what your body can do. It's about what your spirit refuses to stop doing." Kralik's eyes focused on Marcus with renewed attention. "My brother learned to walk again with prosthetics," Marcus continued. "It took him 8 months. Now he teaches other injured veterans how to adapt. He says it's the most important mission he's ever had." The communication board flickered. "What if I never walk? What if this is all I get?" "Then this is all you get," Marcus said honestly. "But Commander, you've already proven something incredible. You've proven that Thexian neural tissue can regenerate with proper treatment. You've shown that recovery is possible. Do you know how many Thexian warriors might benefit from that knowledge in the future? Hundreds, maybe thousands." Kralik was silent, processing this. Marcus sat back down. "You don't have to be the warrior you were before. You just have to be the warrior you are now. And right now, you're the warrior who's changing an entire culture's understanding of what's possible." 2 slow blinks. Then the board displayed. "Thank you." The next day, Marcus tried something different. Instead of the usual therapy routine, he brought in other patients. First came Lyra, the Valorian pilot who had been helping with therapy. "Commander Kralik," she said, settling near his bed, "I want to tell you about the day I lost my wing." She described the crash, the pain, and the devastating realization that she would never fly again. She talked about the depression, the anger, and the slow journey to accepting her new reality. "I thought flying was my entire identity," Lyra said, "but I was wrong. Flying was what I did. Who I am is something much deeper. I'm still figuring that out, and that's okay." Over the following days, Marcus arranged for more visits. A human soldier learning to use prosthetic legs, an Andromedan officer adjusting to partial blindness, a Centaurian engineer who had lost 2 of her forearms. They formed an unofficial support group, meeting in the medical bay 3 times a week. They shared their struggles, their victories, and their fears. For the first time since his injury, Kralik was not alone in his experience. The therapy sessions continued with renewed focus. By week 7, Kralik had regained partial movement in both hands. The control was still limited, but he could grip objects if they were placed in his palm. He could move his arms slightly, though not lift them. Dr. Chen ran new scans every week, documenting the neural regeneration. "This is unprecedented," she told Marcus. I'm writing a research paper on this, with Krolix's permission. This could change Thexian medicine forever. But the 3-month deadline was approaching fast, and Krolix still could not sit up unassisted. He could not walk. He could not perform most basic tasks independently. On the day before the deadline, Thexmar returned with the full Thexian delegation. They had come to evaluate Krolix's progress and determine his fate. Captain Torres, Marcus, and Dr. Chen met them in the medical bay. Krolix had been moved to a special demonstration area, propped up with supports so the officials could see him clearly. Thexmar approached slowly, his expression unreadable. He studied Krolix for a long moment, taking in the changes. The warrior was thinner than before, but his eyes were alert and focused. His hands rested on the arms of his chair, and his fingers moved slightly, a nervous gesture that showed conscious control. Commander Krolix, Thexmar said formally. We have come to assess your progress. The human medic claims you have recovered partially. We must determine if this recovery is sufficient to warrant continued treatment. Marcus stepped forward. With respect, sir, the commander has made remarkable progress. He has regained voluntary movement in both hands and partial arm mobility. His neural regeneration is documented and ongoing. Given more time, we did not grant time without conditions, Thexmar interrupted. Recovery must be meaningful, not merely technical. Commander Krolix must prove he can contribute to society in some capacity. The lead official gestured to an assistant, who brought forward a wooden box. Thexmar opened it carefully, revealing a disassembled ceremonial blade, the kind Thexian warriors used in traditional ceremonies. This is the test, Thexmar announced. Commander Krolix must assemble this blade within 24 hours. It requires precise hand control, focus, and skill. If he succeeds, we will grant another 3 months of treatment. If he fails, he must accept our traditional path. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Assembling the blade was difficult even for someone with full mobility. For Krolix, with his limited hand control, it seemed impossible. But when Marcus looked at Krolix, the warrior's eyes burned with determination. Using his communication board, Krolix spelled out a single word. Accepted. The challenge was set. 24 hours to do the impossible. Part 5 1000 words Kaleko or interesting Hunakea or third-person style Malekni ha or simple basic English ka. Don't use any violated word, so please avoid any violated content. 10:17 a.m. Everyone turned away from the paralyzed alien warrior. Except one human soldier. Part 5. Defining victory. The ceremonial blade lay in pieces on the table beside Krolix's bed. Marcus counted 17 separate components: the handle grip, the blade segments, the ceremonial bindings, and various small connecting pieces. Each piece required precise placement and careful manipulation. Marcus spent the night helping Krolix practice the necessary movements. They broke down each step, figuring out which fingers could grip which pieces, how to angle his hands to compensate for limited mobility, and which motions were possible versus impossible. The traditional method won't work for you, Marcus said around midnight. But maybe we can find a different way. Same result, different path. Krolix's communication board lit up. Will they accept different method? They want the blade assembled, Marcus replied. They didn't specify how. We'll make it work. By morning, word had spread throughout Station Terminus. The medical bay filled with spectators, patients, staff, and curious onlookers from a dozen species. Captain Torres had to establish a perimeter to keep the crowd at a respectful distance. The Thexian delegation arrived exactly on time. Thexmar and 4 other officials positioned themselves near Krolix's workspace. Their faces showed no emotion, but Marcus could sense the tension radiating from them. You may begin whenever you are ready, Commander, Thexmar said formally. Krolix looked at Marcus, who gave an encouraging nod. Then the warrior turned his attention to the blade components. His right hand moved slowly toward the first piece, the central handle core. The crowd watched in absolute silence. Krolix's fingers closed around the piece. His grip was weak, and the component slipped twice before he managed to hold it steady. Sweat beaded on his scaled forehead from the concentration required. Using his other hand, he reached for the first blade segment. This was the crucial moment. In traditional assembly, a warrior would hold the core in one hand and snap the blade segments into place with firm, quick movements. But Kralix did not have that kind of strength or speed. Instead, he did something different. He placed the core flat on the table, stabilizing it with one hand, while using his other hand to guide the blade segment into position. It was slower, less elegant, but it worked. The piece clicked into place. A murmur ran through the watching crowd. Thexmar's expression remained neutral, but his tail twitched slightly. Kralix continued working. Each piece took several minutes to position and secure. His hands shook from the effort. Twice, components fell from his grip, and he had to restart portions of the assembly. The traditional binding cords were especially difficult. They required fine motor control that Kralix barely possessed. Marcus watched nervously, resisting the urge to help. This had to be Kralix's accomplishment alone. An hour passed. Then two. The crowd remained transfixed. Some visitors came and went, but most stayed, unable to look away from the struggling warrior's determination. At one point, Kralix paused, his hands trembling from exhaustion. His communication board flickered to life. "Need break. Take your time," Marcus said. "You've got all day." Kralix rested for 15 minutes, his eyes closed, gathering his strength. The Thexian officials watched without comment. When he resumed, his movements were steadier. The assembly continued piece by piece. Kralix adapted his technique as he went, learning which angles worked best, which fingers provided the most control. It was problem-solving in real time, the mind of a brilliant tactician applied to a physical challenge. By the fourth hour, the blade was nearly complete. Only the ceremonial cap and final binding remained. These were the most delicate pieces, requiring the steadiest control. Kralix picked up the cap with his right hand. His fingers trembled visibly. The small piece wobbled, threatening to fall. In the crowd, someone gasped. Then Marcus saw something remarkable. Kralix adjusted his grip, using his thumb and forefinger in a pincer motion that he had not been able to do before. It was as if the hours of focused effort had pushed his recovering nerves to a new level of function. The cap settled into place with a soft click. Now only the final binding remained, a ceremonial cord that wrapped around the completed blade in a specific pattern. Traditionally, this was done with fluid, practiced movements. Kralix had neither fluidity nor practice, but he had determination. Slowly, painstakingly, Kralix wove the cord through the designated points. His hands cramped. His arms ached from being held in position for hours. But he did not stop. The final loop went through. The final knot was tied. After 5 hours of uninterrupted effort, the ceremonial blade was complete. The medical bay erupted in cheers. Patients whistled and clapped. Staff members embraced each other. Even Captain Torres wiped tears from her eyes, but Marcus watched the Thexian delegation. They stood silent, staring at the completed blade on the table. Finally, Thexmar stepped forward. He picked up the blade carefully, examining it from every angle. The assembly was not perfect. Some connections were slightly loose. The binding cord was uneven in places. But it was complete. Functional. Undeniably a ceremonial blade. Thexmar turned to face Kralix. For a long moment, the two Thexians stared at each other, official and warrior, tradition and transformation. "In all my years," Thexmar said slowly, "I have never seen a blade assembled this way. It defies every tradition we hold sacred." Marcus felt his heart sink. They were going to reject it. But then Thexmar did something unexpected. He placed his right hand over his heart in the Thexian salute of deepest respect. "You have proven something today, Commander Kralix. You have proven that the warrior spirit does not live in the body. It lives in the will, in the refusal to surrender, in the determination to overcome impossible challenges." Thexmar turned to address the entire medical bay. I came here today expecting to witness failure. I expected to take Commander Krolix home to an honorable rest. Instead, I have witnessed something that challenges everything I believed about strength and honor. He looked back at Krolix. You will continue your treatment, Commander. And I will return to the Thexian High Council with a proposal to establish rehabilitation programs for injured warriors. What we have witnessed today must not be forgotten. The other Thexian officials nodded in agreement, their scales shifting to lighter shades, a sign of approval and respect. Krolix used his communication board one final time. Thank you for seeing me. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the newly opened Terminus Rehabilitation Center, watching Krolix work with a young Thexian soldier who had been injured in a training accident. Krolix could now walk with the assistance of support braces. His hand control had improved dramatically. He would never return to combat, but he had found a new purpose. You're doing well, Krolix said to the young soldier, his voice stronger now after months of speech therapy. The pain is temporary. The strength you build is permanent. The young soldier looked at him with hope and gratitude, the same look Krolix had once given Marcus. Marcus smiled and turned to leave. Captain Torres stood nearby, watching the same scene. You started something important, she said to Marcus. No, Marcus replied, gesturing toward Krolix. He started it. I just refused to let people ignore him. Through the window, Marcus could see dozens of injured veterans from multiple species working through their own rehabilitation. The center had become a symbol across the coalition, proof that recovery was possible, that no one had to face their struggles alone. Krolix caught Marcus's eye and raised his hand in a gesture that combined human wave and Thexian salute. Marcus returned it, feeling pride swell in his chest. One human soldier had refused to walk past a paralyzed alien warrior. That simple choice had changed lives, challenged traditions, and proven that compassion was the greatest strength of all. The war was over, but the real battles, the ones fought in hospital beds and rehabilitation centers, continued. And now, thanks to one warrior's courage and one medic's refusal to give up, those battles had hope. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.